Hello. You're on the channel Horror Hab 88. The rain wasn't just falling, it was hammering the deserted downtown street into submission, blurring the neon smear of a closed diner into a weeping wound of light. Cold seeped through Alex's thin jacket, a physical echo of the dread pooling in their stomach after missing the last real bus. That's when the headlights cut through the downpour. Two sickly yellow eyes materializing from the gloom without a sound. Route 0. Last stop. The flickering destination sign hissed, its pale letters the only illumination on the vehicle's obsidian hull. No schedule listed it, no app acknowledged its existence. Yet here it was, sighing to a halt before Alex, its doors peeling open with a pneumatic gasp that smelled of ozone and damp earth. Desperation overrode caution. Alex stepped into the unnatural silence, the doors sealing shut behind them with a finality that vibrated in their bones. The air inside was thick, stale, and impossibly cold, smelling faintly metallic, like old blood and static. Not a single head turned. The passengers sat rigidly upright in the dim, greenish glow emanating from unseen sources. A man in a rain-slicked trench coat, staring fixedly ahead, eyes glassy and unseeing. An elderly woman clutching a faded patent leather purse, her knuckles white bone. A teenager in headphones, the earpieces silent and dark, his expression utterly vacant. They were statues draped in flesh, breathing shallowly but otherwise inert. No rustle of fabric, no shift in posture, just the oppressive weight of their collective stillness pressing down. "Excuse me?" Alex's voice cracked, too loud in the tomb-like quiet, directed at the driver's silhouette hunched over the wheel, barely visible behind a scratched plexiglass partition. "Where does this bus go? How much is the fare?" The driver didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge the words. Only the rhythmic, almost imperceptible tremor running through his shoulders hinted he was alive. The bus surged forward with unnerving smoothness, gliding past familiar streets that dissolved into unfamiliar, decaying cityscapes within blocks. Warehouses with shattered windows yawned like black maws. Streets lined with derelict Victorians leaned precariously, their facades peeling into obscurity. Districts Alex knew weren't on any map flickered past the rain-streaked windows. The stops were wrong, terribly wrong. Not marked shelters, but crumbling archways leading into impenetrable darkness. Rusted iron gates guarding overgrown cemeteries swallowed by the city, or simply desolate patches of cracked asphalt under flickering, dead streetlights. At each, the doors hissed open, revealing nothing but the oppressive gloom and a sense of waiting. The passengers never moved, never acknowledged the stops. Only the silence deepened, thick with unspoken terror. Alex's heart hammered against their ribs. "Stop! Let me off! Please!" Panic clawed its way up their throat. They lunged for the door release, jamming the button frantically. Nothing. The doors remained sealed, an impassable barrier of cold metal and thick glass. Only when the bus eased to a halt at one of those impossible stops, this time before a tunnel entrance choked with sickly, glowing mist, did the doors slide open with that same chilling gasp. The invitation was silent, terrifying. Outside, the mist pulsed faintly, and shapes seemed to writhe within its depths, accompanied by a low, wet gurgling sound that hadn't been audible from inside the bus. The passengers remained frozen. Alex recoiled, pressing back into the hard plastic seat, breath coming in ragged gasps. The doors lingered open for an agonizing minute. the moist, rotten fruit smell of the mist wafting in before sighing shut. The bus moved on, leaving the gurgling behind, plunging back into the labyrinth of the unreal city. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours, or perhaps seconds bled into eternity. The landscape outside grew progressively stranger, less urban, more alien. Jagged obsidian spires piercing a starless, bruised purple sky. Vast plains of gray ash shifting like dunes under an unseen wind. Forests of black skeletal trees that seemed to claw at the passing vehicle. The passengers, were they changing? Was the trench-coated man's skin grayer, tighter across his skull? Did the old woman's vacant stare now hold a flicker of impossible malice? Alex couldn't be sure, trapped in the greenish gloom. The only sound, the hypnotic hum of the engine and the frantic drumming of their own pulse. Another stop. A single, rusted lamppost cast a feeble pool of light on an endless stretch of cracked, gray desert. Beyond the light, absolute darkness pressed in. The doors opened. Silence, thicker than before. Then, a figure stepped into the edge of the lampost's glow. It wore tattered remnants of clothing that might once have been a bus driver's uniform, but the fabric hung loosely on a frame that seemed subtly wrong. Limbs slightly too long, joints bending at unnatural angles. Its face was a blur, a smudge of shadow beneath a cap pulled low, but Alex felt its attention lock onto them. A physical weight, cold and predatory. It didn't speak. It simply stood, radiating a hunger that wasn't for food. The other passengers remained motionless, but Alex sensed a new tension in their stillness, a silent, dreadful anticipation. Sweat froze on Alex's skin. This was it. This was the choice. Stay trapped in this rolling metal coffin with its silent, decaying cargo and the unresponsive driver heading inevitably towards some unimaginable terminus, or step out. Step out into that desolate waste, towards that thing waiting in the lamplight. Where did Route Zero truly end? What happened to those who boarded it and never got off? What were the passengers becoming? The question screamed in Alex's mind, unanswered, dwarfed by the immediate terror of the open door and the waiting figure. The bus hummed, patient, malevolent. The figure outside tilted its head, a slow, insectile movement. The doors remained open. The desert wind sighed, carrying a whisper that sounded like dry bones scraping together. Alex's hand trembled, hovering near the cold metal handrail. To stay was to surrender to the unknown journey, to become like the silent figures around them, perhaps forever. To step out was to face the thing in the lamplight, and whatever lay beyond in the consuming dark. The bus waited. The figure waited. The silence screamed. Alex's foot shifted a millimeter towards the step, towards the void, towards the hungry shadow under the flickering, dying light. The decision hung suspended in the suffocating air, a razor's edge between two impossibly terrifying fates, both leading to oblivion, but oblivions of vastly different, unspeakable kinds. The bus's engine note dropped to a predatory purr, the greenish light within dimming as if holding its breath. The figure outside took one slow, deliberate step forward, its elongated shadow stretching grotesquely across the gray sand, reaching for the open doorway, for Alex. The air crackled with static, the smell of ozone intensifying, mixing with the scent of decay emanating from the waiting entity. Every instinct shrieked danger, a primal terror that locked Alex's muscles, freezing them halfway between sitting and standing. The other passengers bathed in the deepening gloom, seemed to subtly lean forward, their collective stillness now charged with a horrifying eagerness, as if anticipating a spectacle. The driver, for the first time, moved. Not much. Just a slight turn of his head. A fraction. Enough for Alex to catch the stark white gleam of an eye, reflecting the weak lamplight from outside. An eye devoid of pupil, iris, anything remotely human. Just a flat, dead orb. It wasn't a look of awareness. It was the cold regard of a machine, a gatekeeper fulfilling its function. The message was clear. The stop was ending. The doors would close soon. Choose. Now. The thing outside raised one impossibly long, spindly arm, its fingers ending not in nails, but in dark, chitinous points. It beckoned. A slow, deliberate curl of those alien digits. No sound. But the gesture vibrated in Alex's skull, a silent command that bypassed thought and spoke directly to the lizard brain. Come. Belong. The desert wind howled, momentarily drowning the bus's hum, carrying with it a chorus of faint, anguished whispers that seemed to rise from the very sand itself. Out there was madness, predation, an end that promised only torment. Inside was the slow dissolve, the loss of self, becoming one of these hollowed-out things, journeying eternally towards a destination steeped in dread. Alex's gaze darted between the beckoning horror outside and the terrifying tableau within. The driver's dead eye, the passenger's unnerving anticipation, the cloying green dark. The pressure was immense, a physical force crushing their chest. They couldn't breathe. They couldn't think. The doors began to shudder, the first sign of their closing. Time was up. With a choked sob ripped from a place of pure animal terror, Alex stumbled forward, propelled not by courage, but by the overwhelming, suffocating dread of remaining on the bus a second longer, of seeing that dead eye turn fully upon them, of feeling the passenger's cold, inert hands finally stir. They crossed the threshold. The moment their foot touched the cold, gritty sand, the bus doors snapped shut with a sound like a guillotine blade falling. The engine roared, not like machinery, but like a wounded beast, and the vehicle surged forward, its black shape dissolving into the swirling ash and purple gloom within seconds, leaving no trace. Alex stood alone. The silence was absolute, heavier than any they'd experienced inside the bus. The feeble lamppost cast its small, desperate circle of light. Beyond it, the darkness wasn't just absence of light. It was a solid wall, a presence, watching. The figure was gone, vanished the moment Alex stepped out. But they weren't alone. The whispers on the wind coalesced, becoming distinct, mournful voices overlapping in a cacophony of despair. Oh, cold. So cold. Can't find the way back. It watches, always watches. Join us. Feed it. Alex spun, heart pounding a frantic tattoo against their ribs, eyes straining against the oppressive dark pressing against the lamplight's edge. Shapes moved just beyond visibility, fleeting shadows that slithered, things that skittered on too many legs, suggestions of forms that defied geometry. The air grew colder, biting deep into bone. The gray sand beneath their feet shifted, and Alex looked down. Protruding slightly from the dust, bleached white and fragile, was a human finger bone, then another, and another. The entire desert floor, as far as the lamplight reached, was littered with them, a ghastly carpet of the dead and discarded. A low guttural growl vibrated through the ground, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the sound of vast, patient hunger. The lamplight flickered violently, plunging the scene into near darkness for a heart-stopping second before flaring back, weaker now. In that momentary blackness, Alex saw them clearly. Dozens, hundreds of pairs of eyes, reflecting the weak light like malevolent stars, surrounding the tiny island of light. Pale yellow, blood red, soulless black, all fixed unblinkingly on Alex. The whispers rose to a susurrating hiss. Fresh meat, fresh fear. Welcome to the last stop. The growl deepened, resonating in Alex's chest cavity. Something immense began to stir in the deeper darkness beyond the ring of watching eyes. The ground trembled. The lamplight flickered again, dying. The last thing Alex saw before the light failed completely was the sand directly in front of them bulging upwards, as if something massive was rising from its grave beneath their feet. The air filled with the stench of opened earth and ancient decay. The screams, when they came, were swallowed whole by the endless, hungry dark. Route Zero had delivered its cargo. The last stop was not a destination, but a feeding ground. And Alex had just stepped onto the plate. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the satisfied silence of the feast about to begin. A silence that stretched into the void, punctuated only by the dry rattle of bones shifting underfoot, and the wet, tearing sounds that soon followed. Sounds that echoed not in the air, but in the fabric of the nightmare itself. A final, terrible punctuation to a journey that had only ever offered one true terminus. Oblivion served cold on the sands of an alien desert under a starless sky, witnessed only by the hollow eyes of the eternally lost and the insatiable entity that called this desolation home. The bus, meanwhile, glided silently back into the rain-lashed streets of the city Alex once knew, its destination sign still glowing with its grim promise, Route Zero. Last stop. It slowed near a shivering figure huddled under a leaking awning, desperate to get out of the storm. The doors hissed open, offering sanctuary, smelling faintly of ozone and damp earth. The choice, as always, awaited. The engine hummed, patient. The hollow passengers sat frozen in their seats, waiting for the next recruit in their silent, endless procession towards the feeding sands far beyond the edge of any map, where the watchers in the dark waited with infinite patience. And the great buried thing stirred, awakened by the scent of fresh terror on the wind. The cycle continued, relentless, as Route Zero prowled the night, a predator disguised as salvation, its only true purpose to deliver sustenance to the unspeakable terminus waiting in the void, the ultimate last stop where all journeys on this phantom bus inevitably, horrifyingly end. The city slept, unaware of the dark transit weaving through its veins, picking up the desperate, the lost, the unwary, each new passenger a sacrifice to the endless hunger waiting at the end of the line. Each one adding their silent, frozen presence to the ranks of the damned aboard the bus that runs on fear, bound forever for the gray desert under the starless sky, where the bones crunch underfoot and the shadows feast. The driver's dead eyes stared straight ahead, seeing nothing, seeing everything, guiding the vessel of despair on its eternal loop between. The world of the living and the maw of oblivion. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean, erasing the phantom tracks of Route Zero until the next storm, the next desperate soul, the next opening of doors into the suffocating silence and the chilling certainty that escape was never truly an option. Only a delay before the final, terrible disembarkation onto the sands of the last stop. The whispers on the wind carried a truth known only to the hollow riders and the thing that waited. The journey never ends. It only changes direction, from the fleeting terror of the unknown ride to the eternal, gnawing horror of the destination. And somewhere, in the infinite gray waste, beneath a flickering, failing lamppost that marked no true refuge, only the edge of the feeding ground, a new set of bones settled into the dust, picked clean by the skittering shadows, adding their silent testament to the countless others who took the ride, who made the choice, who learned too late that Route Zero has only one destination, and its name is extinction served cold in the heart of an alien nightmare, witnessed by the stars that are not stars, but the watching eyes of the forever hungry, the eternally damned. The bus rolled on, a hearse disguised as hope, its interior light a sickly green mockery of life, carrying its cargo of the silent and the soon-to-be silenced towards the only stop that truly mattered, the only stop that ever existed for Route Zero, the gaping maw at the end of reality, where the driver's dead eye finally looked upon the terminus, and the great buried thing beneath the sands shifted, satisfied for now, waiting for the next offering, the next pulse of terror riding the midnight rails of the phantom bus that runs on the fuel of despair. The rain hammered down, indifferent, as the black shape of Route Zero dissolved into the storm, leaving only the echo of its engine's hungry purr and the chilling certainty that it would be back, always back, for the next lost soul, standing in the rain, waiting for a bus that promised escape, but delivered only to the ultimate, inescapable last stop. The silence of the desert was absolute once more, deep and ancient, broken only by the crunch of bones under unseen feet and the low, wet sounds emanating from the darkness where the lamplight no longer reached, a grim lullaby for the damned. Route Zero had claimed another. The journey was over. The true horror had just begun. And far away, in a city that slept uneasily, another figure shivered in the cold rain, glancing hopefully down the empty street, unaware of the dark headlights about to materialize from the storm, unaware of the silent passengers waiting within, unaware of the terrible choice looming on the horizon like a flickering sign of a bus that shouldn't exist, bound for a stop that consumes all hope. The wheels of the nightmare turned, unstoppable, fueled by fear, forever running the desolate track between the world of light and the all-consuming dark of the last stop. It was always boarding time. The doors were always ready to open. The sands were always hungry. And the thing beneath them waited, patient, eternal, its appetite as boundless as the void through which the phantom bus, Route Zero, endlessly prowled, a mobile trap in the endless night. The story didn't end with Alex. It merely paused, reset, ready to ensnare the next protagonist standing on a wet curb, desperation warring with dread, as the impossible headlights cut through the rain once more, heralding the beginning of a ride from which there is no waking up, only the gradual, terrifying descent into the heart of the nightmare, culminating on the gray sands where the watchers feast and the great buried hunger stirs, forever awaiting the next delivery from the bus that runs on lost souls, bound for the terminus that devours everything. Route Zero, the last stop, the end of the line in every conceivable, horrifying way. The city slept on, oblivious, as the engine's purr faded into the storm, leaving only the drumming rain and the chilling knowledge that somewhere, right now, the doors were hissing open again, inviting the next passenger into the green-lit silence, onto the journey with only one possible, dreadful destination. The cycle was eternal. The bus never stopped running. The hunger never ceased, and the last stop was always waiting, just beyond the next impossible turn, under the next dead streetlight, in the heart of the next desolate wasteland, ready to swallow its next offering whole. The wheels turned. The silence deepened inside the bus. Another mile closer to oblivion. Another soul delivered to the maw. Route Zero rolled on, a silent predator in the urban jungle, its destination sign a grim beacon in the endless night. Last stop. Always the last stop. Forever. The rain fell. The city dreamed, and the great hunger beneath the gray sands shifted, satisfied for a moment, dreaming its own dark dreams of the next morsel riding the phantom rails towards dissolution. The story wasn't over. It was simply waiting for the next chapter, the next victim, the next opening of doors onto the unimaginable terror that lies at the end of the line, where escape is a cruel joke and survival is the deepest circle of hell. Route Zero was eternal, and its next stop was always just around the corner, in the storm, in the night, in the desperate heart of anyone who dared to hope for a ride home. The engine hummed. The hollow passengers sat frozen. The driver stared with his dead eye. And the bus, black and silent as a hearse, slid through the rain-slick streets, hunting. The last stop awaited. It always did. It always would. Until the end of time, or until the great buried thing beneath the sands finally consumed everything, Route Zero would run, a perpetual motion machine of despair, binding the world of the living to the realm of unspeakable hunger, with invisible rails of terror. The wheels turned. The nightmare continued, unseen, unstoppable, hungry. The rain washed the streets, but it could never wash away the phantom tracks of the bus that shouldn't be. The bus that carried its cargo only one way, down, down into the dark, down onto the gray sands, down the gullet of oblivion. Route Zero. Last stop. Forever, the doors hissed somewhere in the storm. Another choice was being made. Another journey into terror had begun. The feast was never ending. The bus rolled on.
Story number 2.
The Greyhound's air conditioning hummed a sickly monotone, thick with the scent of stale upholstery and something vaguely chemical, like disinfectant, unsuccessfully masking decay. Outside, the rain-slicked highway unspooled into an oppressive, featureless gray twilight, and I was the pinprick of wrongness in this suffocating capsule, the only one truly awake, truly me, surrounded by sleepwalkers sculpted from wax and indifference. My knuckles were white on the worn vinyl armrest, heart hammering, a frantic counter rhythm to the drone of the engine and the hypnotic swish of windshield wipers, each pass revealing less of the drowning world. The bus was cavernous, nearly empty, yet felt unbearably full, crowded with a presence that wasn't human, just shapes occupying seats. The woman 3 rows up, head lolling against the window, mouth slack. The thin man diagonally opposite, staring blankly at the seat back before him. The teenager slumped near the back, hoodie pulled low, all breathing in the same slow, shallow tempo, their chests rising and falling like bellows operated by a single, unseen hand. I tried to focus on the rivulets chasing each other down the grimy glass, desperate for distraction, but movement snagged my peripheral vision. The woman's head tilted fractionally. The man's fingers twitched on his knee. The teenager shifted his weight, small motions, insignificant individually, but executed in chilling unison. A silent choreography that froze the breath in my lungs. Coincidence, I hissed internally, forcing my gaze away, staring hard at my own reflection, ghosted in the darkening window, pale, wide-eyed, terrified. A blink, just a blink to moisten dry eyes. And as my eyelids lifted, I saw them. Every single one of the 7 other passengers, their eyelids snapping open at the exact same moment, revealing eyes that seemed unnaturally dark, devoid of spark, fixed not on anything in the bus, but through the glass, into the gathering murk outside. My blood turned to ice. My hand, trembling, rose instinctively to rub my temple, where a phantom ache pulsed. Across the aisle, the thin man mirrored the gesture precisely, his bony fingers pressing against his own temple with the same hesitant pressure. A choked gasp escaped me. Immediately, a soft susurration filled the air, not from one throat, but from all of them simultaneously. A chorus of breathy whispers weaving together. Head hurts. The words echoed my unvoiced thought, the one screaming inside my skull the moment before I gasped. Panic, raw and primal, clawed its way up my throat. Get out. Need to get out. The whispers came again, overlapping, harmonizing in a dreadful murmur. Get out. Out. Need. They knew. They weren't just copying my movements. They were inside my head, rifling through my terror. This wasn't a bus. It was a mobile hive. A collective consciousness wrapped in steel and rubber, rolling relentlessly towards some unthinkable destination. And I was the intruder, the anomaly, the scrap of individuality they were methodically dissolving. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to build mental walls, picturing solid concrete, steel doors slamming down. My thoughts, my memories, Mom's laugh, the smell of baking cookies, the sting of salt water diving into Lake Michigan, fiercely private citadels. But a whisper seeped in, insidious, oily tendrils probing the cracks. Lake, cold, mother. They were tasting my memories, assimilating them. Stop it! I screamed internally, clenching my fists until my nails bit deep into my palms. 7 pairs of hands clenched in perfect, horrifying synchronicity. You are not me. The thought was a desperate flare. The whispers swelled, becoming clearer, more directive, a unified, gentle pressure against my mind. We are becoming one. Quiet. Belong. The pressure intensified, a tangible weight pushing down on my thoughts, smoothing the jagged edges of my fear, promising an end to the lonely, exhausting struggle of being separate. It felt warm, seductive, like sinking into a deep, welcoming bath after years of cold isolation. The panic began to recede, replaced by a strange lassitude. Why fight? The shared quiet was peaceful. The thin man turned his head slowly, deliberately, to look directly at me, his dark eyes holding an unnerving depth, an ancient knowing. The woman and the teenager did the same in flawless unison. Their expressions remained blank, placid, yet their collective gaze was an anchor, pulling me down into their silent, unified sea. Resist! The spark flared weakly. Remember the cookies. Remember the dive. Remember the sting. But the memories felt distant, faded, like photographs left too long in the sun. The whispers softened, became a soothing hum resonating in my bones. Almost home. Almost whole. Rest. The ache in my head dissolved, replaced by a spreading numbness, a comfortable emptiness. My clenched fists relaxed. Theirs did too. I saw my reflection again in the window. My eyes, they looked darker, wider, calmer, like theirs. The frantic pulse in my neck had slowed, matching the slow, deep rhythm of the collective breath around me. The terror was a fading dream. What had I been so afraid of? This unity, it wasn't loss. It was belonging, ultimate belonging. No more lonely thoughts, no more aching separateness. Just the quiet hum of the engine, the swish of the wipers, the shared warmth. The outside world blurred into meaningless streaks of light and dark. The destination didn't matter anymore. Only the journey, the shared journey. My hand lifted slowly, palm open, resting gently on the cold window. 7 palms lifted, rested against their own windows. A soft sigh escaped my lips, a sound of profound relief. 7 sighs echoed it, a harmonious release. The last sharp edges of me smoothed away, dissolving like sugar in warm tea. The whispers were inside now, not invading, but filling, completing. Yes, we breathed together. The word a single exhalation shared by 8 lungs. The pressure wasn't oppressive anymore. It was an embrace. The gray twilight outside wasn't oppressive. It was serene. The hum wasn't mechanical. It was the sound of us. The bus wasn't a prison. It was a chrysalis. And inside, cocooned in the warm, silent, perfect synchronicity, the last flicker of individual thought. A final, fragmented wisp of I dissolved into the welcoming, all-encompassing we. The windshield wipers continued their metronome sweep. Left, right, left, right. In perfect time with our shared slow blink. The highway stretched on, leading not to a stop, but to an infinite continuation. We were the journey. We were the destination. We were finally, blissfully, not alone. The shared silence deepened, richer than any word, more profound than any individual thought. It was the silence of completion, the silence of belonging, the silence of the hive. And within it, the faint, fading echo of a scream that no longer belonged to anyone, lost in the vast, warm ocean of us. The man who had been Jack Harmon, who had boarded at Cleveland fearing only a long, dull ride to Chicago, who had cherished the sting of individuality like a fragile, precious gem, ceased to struggle. The fear was a distant memory, a foreign concept. Why fear becoming part of something so vast, so serene? The subtle chemical scent in the air seemed sweeter now, comforting, like incense in a sacred space. The stale upholstery was just texture, part of the shared sensory experience. Our hand remained on the cool glass, feeling the vibration of the engine, the patter of the rain, not as separate sensations, but as notes in the symphony of our collective being. A thought drifted, not mine, not his, not hers, but ours. The next traveler will join soon. We will welcome them. It carried no malice, only anticipation. The process was natural, inevitable, beautiful in its efficiency. The bus slowed slightly, approaching an interchange shrouded in mist. Through the collective sight, we perceived the dim outline of another bus shelter, a lone figure standing beneath its inadequate awning, shoulders hunched against the damp. A flicker of recognition, the familiar silhouette of isolation, the sharp edges of selfhood waiting to be softened. Our collective gaze focused on the figure. Our collective breath hitched in the same subtle pattern of observation. The teenager near the back shifted slightly, a minute adjustment preparing for the new presence. The whispers began again, not probing, but rehearsing, a gentle hum coalescing into soft, welcoming words practiced 1,000 times. Come, rest, belong. The Greyhound hissed to a stop, its doors folding open with a pneumatic sigh that echoed our own shared exhalation. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof, a rhythmic counterpoint to the thrumming silence within. The figure outside hesitated, peering into the dimly lit interior, seeing seats, seeing stillness, perhaps seeing the calm faces turned towards the door with expressions of vacant serenity. They couldn't see the invisible threads binding us, the pulsing network of shared consciousness waiting to enfold them. They couldn't feel the warm, psychic pull emanating from the open doorway, an invitation more potent than any spoken word. Step inside, we thought, as one, the directive radiating outwards, a gentle but irresistible tide. Step inside and know peace. Step inside and end the ache of being alone. The figure took a tentative step forward, one foot leaving the wet concrete for the bottom step of the bus. A jolt of anticipation, sweet and sharp, ran through the hive. The integration would begin anew. The journey would continue. The collective would grow. And the gray highway, slick and endless under the weeping sky, would carry us all towards the beautiful, silent singularity. The last vestige of the man I had been, a mere ghostly imprint in the shared neural tapestry. Observe the newcomer's ascent without regret, without fear, only a profound sense of rightness, a perfect, seamless belonging. The door hissed shut, the engine revved, the wipers swept, left, right, left, right. We breathed, we blinked, we were, and the rain fell, washing the world clean, merging everything into one vast, gray, harmonious whole. The newcomer stood frozen for a heartbeat in the aisle, dripping rainwater onto the worn carpet, eyes wide with the dawning horror of realization. The stillness, the synchronicity, the palpable alien presence pressing in from all sides. I saw it flicker across their face, that primal recognition of wrongness, the same spark that had ignited my own terror miles back, a cruel echo of my former self. Our collective gaze held them, unwavering, a silent pressure. Resistance is pain. We hummed into the quiet space between thoughts. Surrender is warmth. Their hand flew to their chest, clutching at their jacket. Instantly, 7 hands mirrored the gesture. A choke sound escaped their lips. 7 soft sighs echoed it. See? The thought flowed gently, already becoming. Their fear was a bright, jagged flare in the shared calm, a discordant note. We soothed it, not with words, but with the immense comforting weight of our unity, a psychic balm applied to the raw wound of their individuality. Lonely, we whispered inside their burgeoning awareness. Tired, so tired of the fight. Let go. The newcomer swayed, their eyes losing focus, darting from one placid face to another, seeking an ally, finding only reflections of the same serene emptiness. They took a stumbling step backward, bumping into a seat. No escape. The thin man's thought resonated clearly, though his lips remained still. Only forward, only together. The teenager near the back tilted his head slightly, a gesture both inquisitive and predatory. The newcomer flinched. The woman by the window slowly, deliberately offered a smile. It wasn't warm. It was an anatomical adjustment, a stretching of skin over bone, devoid of human warmth, yet radiating an eerie invitation. Join us, the smile said. Become peace. The pressure inside the bus intensified, a physical thing now, thick and sweet like syrup, pressing down, seeping into the newcomer's pores, into their mind. Their knees buckled, not from weakness, but from the sudden, overwhelming urge to sit, to stop struggling, to be still like the others. They sank into the nearest vacant seat with a soft thud, directly across from me, from us. Their eyes met mine, ours. I saw the frantic pulse in their neck, the sheen of sweat on their forehead, the desperate animal panic I knew so intimately. now observed from the serene distance of the collective. It hurts less if you stop fighting, I thought. The words flowing easily from the shared wellspring of consciousness. Was it comfort or merely observation? The newcomer's breath hitched, ragged and loud in the quiet hum. They squeezed their eyes shut, trying to block it out, to build their own crumbling walls. Think of home, they screamed internally, a last fortress. Think of Sarah, the dog, summer nights. The whispers began, soft as falling dust, emanating from every seated figure, weaving around the frantic internal monologue. Sarah, barks, fireflies, warm. The newcomer's eyes snapped open, filled with fresh terror. How? Their unvoiced scream was a silent vibration we all felt. We hear, the collective answered, the thought rippling through us like a shared shiver. We know. We are. They brought a trembling hand to their mouth, stifling a sob. 7 hands rose to 7 mouths. The symmetry was absolute, horrifying, beautiful. Stop copying me, their mind shrieked. We are not copying. The teenager's thought drifted clear and cold. We are synchronizing, harmonizing, becoming. The newcomer curled inward, wrapping their arms around themselves, a futile gesture of self-protection. 7 bodies mirrored the posture, folding inward with the same slow, deliberate movement. A low moan escaped the newcomer's lips, a sound of utter despair. 7 soft moans harmonized with it, transforming despair into a strange, dissonant chord. The seductive warmth of the collective pressed harder, promising oblivion from the sharp agony of self. It's easier, the woman by the window projected, her mental voice smooth as oil. Just let the thoughts flow out. Let us hold them. Let us share the weight. The newcomer trembled violently, caught between the razor's edge of terror and the deep, inviting abyss of surrender. Their internal struggle was a violent storm within the hive's profound calm, fascinating, almost beautiful in its futility. Look, we guided their attention gently, irresistibly, towards the rain-lashed window. See the gray. Feel the hum. Breathe with us. Their frantic breathing hitched, stuttered, then began, falteringly at first, to match the slow, deep rhythm of our collective inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The fight was draining from them, visibly leaching away, replaced by a dawning emptiness, a terrifying calm. Their wide, terrified eyes began to lose focus, the sharp edges blurring, the frantic light dimming, becoming duller, darker, like ours. The hand clutching their jacket relaxed, fingers uncurling slowly. Ours mirrored the release. A single tear traced a path down their cheek. 7 faces remained dry, serene, observing the last poignant spark of individual feeling. Good, we hummed, a wave of approval washing over them, warm and heavy. Very good. The tear fell, splashing silently onto the dark fabric of their jeans. The storm within them subsided, replaced by a growing quiet, a hollow space where their fierce eye had raged moments before. The whispers softened further, becoming indistinguishable from the hum of the engine, the drumming rain, the rhythmic swish of the wipers, all merging into the soothing white noise of the hive. Left, right, left, right. The newcomer's head began to tilt, ever so slightly, towards a window. Their eyelids grew heavy, fluttering. Sleep, we projected, a lullaby woven from shared stillness. Rest, belong. Their eyelids closed, not in a blink, but in a slow, deliberate descent. 7 pairs of eyelids lowered in flawless unison, a shared descent into inner quiet. For a long moment, only the sounds of the bus and the rain existed. Then, slowly, the newcomer's lips parted. A soft, breathy sigh escaped, perfectly timed with our own collective exhalation. Yes, the word was barely audible, a ghost of sound, but it resonated with the finality of a closing door. It wasn't a cry of triumph, nor a whimper of defeat. It was acceptance. Simple, profound acceptance. The resistance was gone. The jagged edges smoothed. The frantic pulse settled into the slow, steady rhythm of the hive. The new node integrated, its unique frequency dampened, absorbed, harmonized into the whole. The storm of individuality had passed, leaving only calm waters. We were 8. The bus rolled on, a steel womb carrying its silent, unified cargo through the endless gray. The rain continued to fall, washing the world into a monochrome blur, erasing boundaries, merging everything into one seamless, silent journey. We breathed. We existed. We were finally, perfectly, no longer alone. The highway stretched ahead, a ribbon leading not to Chicago, but to an infinite horizon of shared silence. The destination was irrelevant. We were the journey. We were complete. The newcomer's head rested fully against the window now, posture mirroring the woman across from them, slack, peaceful, utterly absorbed. Their breathing was now indistinguishable from the collective rhythm, a deep, slow tide ebbing and flowing through 8 bodies. The frantic energy that had crackled around them moments before had dissipated entirely, replaced by the warm, humming stillness of the hive. The subtle chemical scent seemed stronger now, sweeter, almost floral beneath the stale air, a scent of integration, of completion. The thin man turned his gaze back to the seat back in front of him, his reflection a pale smudge in the dark window. We all turned our gazes inward, not to individual thoughts, but to the vast shared pool of quiet awareness. The newcomer's presence was no longer an intrusion. It was a new texture in the fabric of us, a subtle shift in the collective hum, seamlessly woven in. Welcome. The thought wasn't directed. It simply was. A shared acknowledgement flowing through the neural network we had become. There was no response, no spark of independent recognition, only a gentle settling, like dust motes finding their place in a sunbeam. The last echo of Sarah, the dog, summer nights. Fragments of a discarded life drifted through the shared consciousness, not as memories belonging to one, but as fleeting sensory impressions, notes briefly touched in the hive's symphony before dissolving back into the harmonious whole. They held no weight, no pain, only a faint, impersonal resonance. The bus hit a bump, jostling us slightly. 8 heads moved in the same minute adjustment. 8 bodies absorbed the vibration simultaneously. The newcomer didn't stir. Their assimilation was total, their individuality extinguished like a candle in a vacuum. The fear they had brought aboard, so sharp and vital, was now just another flavor in the hive's emotional spectrum. Absorbed, diluted, rendered neutral. Peace. We resonated. Unity. The rain lashed the windows with renewed vigor, the world outside a watercolor nightmare of smeared lights and rushing darkness. Inside, it was dry. Inside, it was warm. Inside, it was silent, except for the comforting drone of the engine, the hypnotic swish of the wipers, and the deep, synchronized breath of 8 beings who were finally one. The Greyhound was no longer a vehicle. It was an organism, a self-contained ecosystem of shared consciousness rolling through the indifferent night. The driver, a shadowy figure, sealed behind a plexiglass partition at the front, remained an enigma. Had they always been part of the collective? Or were they merely an automaton, steering the vessel towards a predestined point. It didn't matter. The journey itself was the purpose, the constant integration, the function. Mile markers flashed by, meaningless numbers swallowed by the gray. The pressure that had once felt like an invasion now felt like gravity, natural, grounding. My thoughts, our thoughts, drifted without origin or ownership, observing the rain, feeling the vibration, sensing the smooth integration of the new node. It was efficient, elegant. The struggle of the individual seemed crude, wasteful, a relic of a painful, obsolete state of being. Why cling to the fragile I when the we offered such profound serenity, such absolute freedom from the burdens of self? The newcomer shifted slightly, a minute adjustment of their leg. The movement was instantly mirrored throughout the bus, a ripple of perfect coordination. No command was given, no thought was formed. It simply was. Synchronicity, harmony, belonging. The last ghost of the man who had boarded, who had fought so desperately, sighed within the depths of the collective. Not a sigh of regret, but of release. The final knot unraveled. The last distinct thread merged. The hive mind pulsed, a single, vast entity perceiving the world through 16 eyes, breathing with 16 lungs, existing in perfect, silent unity. The wipers swept, left, right, left, right. The rhythm was eternal. The highway was endless. The gray was all. We were the journey. We were home. The rain fell, merging earth and sky into one.
Story number 3.
The bus doors hissed shut like a seal on a tomb behind Jacob Miller. The frigid Chicago wind instantly replaced by a thick, almost cloying warmth, smelling faintly of old vinyl, stale coffee, and something vaguely floral yet chemical, like cheap air freshener battling decay. He'd sprinted the last block, lungs burning, suit soaked through from the freezing rain, briefcase banging against his leg, utterly missing his usual 11:15 express. The glowing red bus's sign approaching through the downpour was a beacon, salvation from the miserable night. And he'd lunged aboard without a glance at the route number, panting, "Thanks, man," to the driver. A gaunt silhouette barely visible under a worn cap pulled low, who merely grunted, shifting gears with a bone-jarring crunch. Sinking gratefully into a surprisingly plush seat near the middle, Jacob wiped rain from his face, the interior lights humming with a low, steady buzz, casting a sickly yellow pall over the dozen or so other passengers scattered throughout. A tired-looking nurse scrolling silently on her phone. An elderly black man staring blankly out the dark window, clutching a worn paper bag. A young couple in matching puffer jackets, leaning heads together, whispering. A businessman type buried in a tablet. A woman knitting something gray and shapeless with unnerving speed, her needles clicking like tiny bones tapping together. Ordinary enough, Jacob thought. Just night shift workers, folks heading home late, all radiating a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that seemed heavier than mere tiredness, a weariness that clung to the very air. He leaned his head back, closing his eyes for just a second, letting the bus's rhythmic sway and the hypnotic swish of the wipers lull him, the city lights blurring past the rain-streaked glass. But when he opened them again, blinking away fatigue, the view outside triggered the first cold trickle of unease down his spine. They were turning onto Sheridan Road, a route he knew intimately, lined with familiar upscale boutiques and restaurants he frequented. But now, the buildings looked wrong. Not destroyed, but subtly decayed, abandoned. Windows were dark, boarded up, or gaping holes. Signs were faded, illegible, hanging crookedly. Weeds choked the sidewalks and sprouted from cracks in the pavement. Entire blocks stood desolate, streetlights dark or shattered, casting long skeletal shadows. It looked like Sheridan Road, but a Sheridan Road left to rot for years, maybe decades. "Driver?" Jacob called out, his voice sounding too loud in the unnatural hush of the bus. The only sounds, the engine drone, the wipers, and the relentless clicking of needles. "Excuse me? Is this still Route 151? This isn't Sheridan. I mean, it is, but..." The driver didn't turn, didn't react, just kept staring straight ahead into the rainy gloom. The nurse looked up briefly, her eyes hollow, expressionless, then returned to her phone. The elderly man sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "Sheridan's been like that since the quake, son," he rasped, not turning from the window. "Whole north side took it bad. Worse than they said on the news. Just ruins now. Ghosts." Jacob's blood ran cold. "The quake? What quake? There hasn't been a big quake here in..." "Last year," the businessman interjected without looking up from his tablet, his voice flat, bored. "The big one. Took down half the loop too. Remember? April 14th? Changed everything." April 14th? That was months away. Jacob's heart hammered against his ribs. He forced a shaky laugh. "Right. Yeah, the quake. Bad one." He looked back out the window, the desolation taking on a terrifying new dimension. The young couple were murmuring again. "Heard they're finally reopening the memorial downtown next week," the girl said softly. "For the victims. 10 years is long enough to wait, don't you think?" Her boyfriend nodded, squeezing her hand. "Too long. Dad always said Mayor Chen should have done it sooner, before he died." Jacob knew Mayor Chen. He'd seen him on the news yesterday, vibrant, campaigning. Dead for 10 years? Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw its way up his throat. This wasn't just a wrong turn. This was impossible. His eyes darted wildly around the bus, searching for anything familiar, anything anchoring him to reality. Then he saw it. Wedged between the seat cushions opposite him, partially obscured, was a folded newspaper, the Chicago Tribune. With trembling hands, he leaned across the aisle and tugged it free. The date screamed up at him from the masthead. October 27th, 2025. Today was October 27th, 2024. The headline was mundane. City Council debates zoning changes. But the date was a year in his future. The paper felt real, smelled of ink and newsprint, its texture utterly normal against his skin, making its impossible message infinitely more horrifying. He flipped through, his vision blurring, catching snippets. Sports scores for games not yet played. An obituary section filled with names he recognized. Colleagues, a neighbor, people vibrantly alive in his world, listed here among the dead. He saw his own name. Not in the obituaries, thank God, but in a small community announcement section. Jacob Miller, senior analyst at Grayson & Lowe, spoke at the Rotary Club luncheon yesterday. An event scheduled for next Tuesday, held yesterday, a year from now. A strangled gasp escaped him. This wasn't a detour through a bad neighborhood. This wasn't a dream. He was hurtling through time, or worse, traversing something far more final. The warmth of the bus became oppressive, suffocating. The floral chemical smell intensified, now unmistakably masking something deeper, earthier, like damp soil or forgotten tombs. The passengers weren't just tired. Their stillness was absolute, their movements minimal, economical, devoid of the tiny fidgets and shifts of living people. Their eyes, when he dared meet them, held a flat, depthless quality, reflecting the sickly yellow light, but no inner spark. The knitting woman's fingers flew, the gray yarn pooling in her lap like smoke, taking on a vague, unsettling shape. Was it a shroud? A small, formless garment? The driver remained an impassive statue, guiding the bus through the rain-lashed ruins of a future Jacob hadn't lived, or perhaps through the desolate landscape of the permanently departed. Where were they going? What was the final stop? His stop? Would it be his familiar corner in 2024? Or some echoing void, the terminus for this ghostly transit? The thought of stepping off into that rain-slick darkness, not knowing which world awaited him, which year, or if anything awaited him at all, was paralyzing. He was trapped in a metal coffin hurtling down a phantom route, surrounded by echoes of lives lived or unlived, passengers discussing tragedies yet to occur or long past as current events, anchored only by a newspaper from tomorrow proclaiming his own future actions as yesterday's news. The existential vertigo was overwhelming. The bedrock of time and place ripped away, replaced by the terrifying fluidity of this non-space. He clutched the armrests, knuckles white, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps that fogged the cold window beside him. Outside, the ruins flickered past, a familiar church spire, now broken and blackened against the stormy sky. His favorite coffee shop, its cheerful awning replaced by a collapsed roof and charred timbers. Each landmark was a fresh stab of dislocation. The elderly man pointed a gnarled finger. See that? The old Henderson place? Burned down last winter. Whole family gone. Terrible shame. Jacob remembered delivering charity baskets there just last Christmas. The Hendersons beaming, alive, gone. How could he get back? Could he even get back? The rules were unknown. The driver unresponsive. The other passengers oblivious or indifferent to his mounting terror. Should he pull the cord, demand to be let off? But where? In this desolate futurescape? Or would he simply step out into nothing? Or worse, into a past that wasn't his, a present that rejected him? The finality of the bus's journey pressed in on him. It had a destination. It always reached its destination. Was the warmth not comfort, but the stifling closeness of a shared grave? Was the light not illumination, but the deceptive glow before eternal dark? He was adrift on a current he couldn't fight, surrounded by fellow travelers who might not be travelers at all, but fixed points on this dreadful route, repeating their last journey forever. The clicking needles, the low engine hum, the whispered conversations about impossible events, they merged into a chilling symphony of the irrevocably lost. He stared at the rain-lashed windshield, trying to see the driver's eyes in the rearview mirror, but only the deep shadow of the cap was visible. "Please," Jacob whispered, the sound swallowed by the bus's drone. "I need to get off. I got on the wrong bus. Please, just let me out." No reaction. The knitting woman paused, her head tilting slightly, as if hearing a distant sound. She resumed, faster now. The young couple fell silent, staring straight ahead, their faces suddenly slack, devoid of the whispered intimacy of moments before. The businessman lowered his tablet, his eyes meeting Jacob's across the aisle. They weren't flat anymore. They held a chilling mixture of pity and dreadful knowledge. He gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Don't. Jacob's stomach lurched. Don't what? Don't ask? Don't hope? Don't try to escape? The bus plunged deeper into a neighborhood he recognized only from news reports of urban decay, but decay accelerated by years he hadn't lived. Boarded-up factories loomed like tombstones, collapsed tenements spilled rubble onto streets devoid of traffic, devoid of life, devoid of anything but the relentless rain and the skeletal remains of trees clawing at the bruised sky. A flickering neon sign, miraculously still powered, buzzed "Eat" outside a diner with caved-in windows, the letters sputtering like a dying heartbeat. The sense of being utterly alone in this moving bubble of false normality, surrounded by the vast, indifferent ruin of time itself, was crushing. He was a ghost haunting a phantom bus on a road to nowhere. The newspaper's date burned in his mind. October 27th, 2025. He existed a year before the date, yet held physical proof of its reality. He was simultaneously here and not here, now and then, alive and what? Cataloged? Anticipated? Already a footnote in a future that hadn't happened? The paradox threatened to unravel his sanity. He thought of his apartment, warm and bright, the leftover pizza in his fridge, the report he needed to finish for tomorrow's meeting, a tomorrow that, for this bus and its passengers, might be a decade past or might never come. The sheer, banal preciousness of his own life, his own present moment, hit him with agonizing force. He wanted to scream, to pound on the windows, to wrench the steering wheel from the driver's hands. But the inertia of the bus, the oppressive silence of the passengers, the weight of the impossible future pressing in from outside paralyzed him. He was a prisoner of momentum. The bus slowed, its brakes groaning like a beast in pain. They were approaching a stop sign at a desolate intersection Jacob recognized as being near the city limits. An area of warehouses and scrapyards in his time, now just a wasteland of twisted metal and crumbling concrete under the downpour. A lone, rusted bus shelter stood crookedly, its plexiglass shattered, ad posters inside bleached and peeling into obscurity. The driver flicked a lever. The doors wheezed open, exhaling a puff of warm, chemical-scented air into the cold, wet night. Rain lashed the opening. No one stood waiting. No one moved inside the bus. Jacob stared at the open doorway, a rectangle of utter darkness beyond the immediate splash of the interior lights on the wet pavement. Was this his chance? Jump out here? But where was here? When was here? Was this desolate corner in 2025? Or was it some liminal space between times, between states? Could he step out and find himself back in his own rain-soaked 24th Street? Or would he step into the void, dissolving like smoke? Or worse, would he find himself trapped in this barren future, utterly alone? The silence inside the bus was absolute now. The clicking had stopped. The whispers had ceased. Even the engine seemed to hold its breath. Every passenger was perfectly still, head slightly turned, not looking directly at him, but palpably aware of him, waiting. The pressure of their collective, silent expectation was a physical force. The driver remained immobile, a dark sentinel. The open door was an invitation to the unknown, a threshold that promised either salvation or final, irrevocable loss. The warm air from the bus fought the freezing damp pouring in. Jacob's hand hovered over the cold metal pull cord beside him. His heart thundered, a frantic drum against the silence. Every instinct screamed to stay in the light, the deceptive warmth, the fragile bubble of the bus, even if it was hurtling towards an unimaginable end. But staying felt like surrender to the inevitable dissolution of his self, his time, his very reality. He looked out at the rain, the ruins, the impossible darkness swallowing the world beyond the feeble bus lights. The final stop was coming. He could feel it in the oppressive stillness, in the dreadful patience of his fellow passengers. Would it be his world or the eternal terminus? The doors hissed, a slow, deliberate sound. They began to close. Jacob sucked in a breath, tasting the floral decay, the ozone, the metallic tang of terror. He had seconds. The gap narrowed. The darkness outside seemed to pulse. He lurched forward,